New Year's Eve, 1977. Two of the most talented musicians in New York City are standing outside the most famous nightclub on earth, soaking wet, turned away at the door in the snow. Inside, their music is literally playing. The crowd is dancing to their record, and the doorman won't let them in. They walk 1 block home. They open 2 bottles of champagne. They pick up their instruments in fury. And in one sitting, in that apartment, they write the biggest selling single in the entire history of Atlantic Records. The club that slammed the door on them would spend the next year playing that song on a loop, unable to keep it out, unable to keep it quiet, unable to do anything but surrender to it. This is the story of how a locked door on New Year's Eve made CHIC immortal. Chapter 1. 2 kids who built something from nothing. To understand how far Nile Rodgers and Bernard Edwards had come by that New Year's Eve, you have to go back to where they started. They met in 1970, 2 young session musicians grinding through the New York City gig circuit, playing other people's music for other people's money, in the background, unnamed. They played together in different configurations for years, building a friendship and a musical shorthand that most bands never develop in a lifetime. They heard things the same way. They finished each other's musical sentences. By 1977, they were ready to do something of their own. Critical establishment was already dismissing as throwaway. Their first single was Dance, 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 and it reached number 6 on the Billboard Hot 100. The session vocalist they used for that debut record was an unknown young singer who needed the work. His name was Luther Vandross. CHIC had arrived. They had a record deal with Atlantic. They had a hit. And now they had an invitation to the most exclusive room in the world. Chapter 2, The Invitation. The call came from Grace Jones, a Jamaican-born model and singer who was already one of the most electrifying presences in New York nightlife. A force of nature who moved between fashion, music, and performance art with total authority. She wanted Rodgers and Edwards to produce her next album. She told them to come meet her at Studio 54 on New Year's Eve. She'd leave their names at the door. Studio 54 was not just a club, it was a symbol. The most famous nightclub in the world, where Andy Warhol and Bianca Jagger and Liza Minnelli danced together under a giant crescent moon, where the velvet rope was the most ruthless editorial process in New York City. Getting past the door at Studio 54 meant you had made it. Being turned away meant, in the language of that world, that you hadn't. Rodgers and Edwards dressed for the occasion. They later recalled their suits cost them thousands of dollars each, real money in the late 1970s. They looked the part. They were the part. One of their records was playing inside that building at that very moment. They walked to the back entrance. Rodgers told the doorman they were personal friends of Grace Jones. The doorman slammed the door in their faces. Chapter 3. They tried twice. This is the detail Rodgers always tells. They didn't just try once and give up. They tried twice. They stood in the cold and snow on New Year's Eve in their expensive suits, and they went back to that door a second time and got shut out a second time. The doorman's exact words, as Rodgers has repeated them ever since, were not polite. He told them to go away in language that can't be broadcast. Grace Jones had simply forgotten to put their names on the list, so there they were. New Year's Eve, the biggest night of the year, shut out of a club playing their own music, their fancy shoes soaked through in the snow. No party to go to, no room to walk into, nowhere to channel the energy of a night that was supposed to be a celebration. Rodgers lived 1 block away. They walked back to his apartment. They stopped at a corner liquor store and picked up 2 bottles of Dom Perignon, what Rodgers called rock and roll mouthwash. They went upstairs. They drank both bottles quickly. And then they did the only thing 2 musicians know how to do when everything else falls apart. They picked up their instruments and started playing. Chapter 4, Written in a Night, out of pure rage. The fury went straight into the music. Rodgers and Edwards jammed, and within that first session the shape of the song appeared, a groove that locked together so perfectly it felt inevitable. The kind of thing you can only write when you stop thinking and just feel. But it was the chorus where the anger lived. The original lyric was not "freak out." It was something far more direct. It was exactly what the doorman had said to them, 2 words, aimed right back at Studio 54. They knew they could never release that version. You couldn't get radio play with those words in 1978, so they tried "Freak Off," which Rodgers immediately decided sounded terrible, and then something shifted. Rodgers had seen a dance craze spreading through the clubs of New York called the Freak. If they aimed the song at that dance instead of at the doorman, it transformed from a protest into an invitation. The fury was still in it, but now it pulled people toward the dance floor instead of pushing them away. "Freak Out" became the hook. "Le Freak" became the title, and overnight, a bitter piece of revenge written by 2 men in wet shoes became one of the most joyful dance records ever made. Rodgers has said it himself. Had they not come up with the original, furious version first, they would never have found "Freak Out." The door that slammed on them built the song that opened every other door. Chapter 5: The Label That Hated It. Now here's the detail almost nobody knows. It wasn't only Studio 54 that rejected CHIC that night. When they finished recording Le Freak and brought it to Atlantic Records, the label hated it too. Rodgers described playing it for the Atlantic executives in a conference room. The song ran for about 7.5 minutes, and as it played, the executives quietly stood up and filed out of the room one by one, until by the time the song ended, only Rodgers, Edwards, and their attorney were left sitting there. Everyone else was in the hallway trying to figure out how to tell them the song wasn't good enough. The label didn't believe in it. The club hadn't believed in them. And Le Freak went to #1 anyway, not just on the Billboard Hot 100, but simultaneously on the soul chart and the dance chart. It hit the top 10 across Austria, Belgium, France, Germany, the Netherlands, Norway, Sweden, Switzerland, and the United Kingdom. It reached #1 in Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and South Africa. It spent 6 weeks at the top of the American charts. And it became, at that point, the biggest-selling single in the entire history of Atlantic Records, the label whose executives had walked out of the room while it was playing. The same year, a collection called A Night at Studio 54 came out, and Le Freak was on it. Rodgers and Edwards attended the release party. This time, the club let them in without any trouble. Chapter 6: What the Closed Door Actually Built. But the sales numbers, enormous as they are still only part of the story. Because what Nile Rodgers and Bernard Edwards built in that apartment on New Year's Eve 1977 wasn't just one hit record. It was the beginning of a production empire that quietly shaped the sound of everything that came after. The same partnership that wrote Le Freak wrote and produced We Are Family for Sister Sledge, one of the defining anthems of the era. They produced Upwards didn't make it that far. He died of pneumonia in Tokyo in 1996, at just 43 years old, while on tour with CHIC. Rodgers has spoken about that loss ever since with a grief that has never faded. The partner he found at 19, the one whose ear matched his own like nothing he's found before or since. But what they made together is still playing. Le Freak was inducted into the Grammy Hall of Fame in 2015 and preserved in the Library of Congress National Recording Registry in 2018. The song the label cleared the room to avoid is now considered culturally, historically, and aesthetically significant enough to protect forever. So the next time someone tells you that talent is enough, that if you're good enough the doors will open, tell them about New Year's Eve 1977. 2 of the most gifted musicians alive, standing in the snow outside a club playing their own music, getting told to get lost, and then going home and writing a song that outlasted the club, outlasted the dorm.